I was 72 hours into retirement when the waiter leaned in and told me my son might be trying to kill me. It was a Thursday evening in early spring. The sun hadn't fully set yet, and from the corner table at the Rowan, the soft gold of twilight spilled across the glassware. I was seated near the window, the same table where my late husband Julian once surprised me with a carved wooden box containing the first stock certificate of Lexora Inc., the company we built together from a guest bedroom and 2 second-hand laptops. My name is Sylvia Hawthorne. I'm 67. Last week, I signed the final agreement to sell Lexora for $40 million. I thought a dinner celebration would be fitting, not flashy, just a quiet evening with my only son, Garrett, and his wife, Camille. A nod to a life's work concluded, a new beginning. The restaurant was buzzing softly with a kind of polished quiet only the expensive ones know how to maintain. Garrett ordered the chef's tasting menu. Camille arrived in pale gray silk 5 minutes late and barely kissed me on the cheek before sitting down. She always smelled like the inside of an exclusive department store, notes of floral and something sharp beneath. The conversation during appetizers felt like a performance. They asked me about retirement, travel plans, books I'd meant to write. I asked Garrett how the renovation of their condo was going. Camille answered every question in his place. Halfway through the second course, a string quartet began playing something slow and classic. Camille touched Garrett's wrist with the ease of someone who'd long since stopped asking. He stood, offered her his hand, and they moved to the small dance floor set between the bar and the fountain. Their bodies swayed gently in rhythm. Her head tipped back in laughter I couldn't hear. That was when the waiter, Ellis, his name tag read, stepped quietly to my side. He wasn't the one assigned to our table. I noticed his hesitation, the way his eyes flicked between me and the dance floor before he spoke. "Ma'am," he said, leaning just slightly, his voice no louder than a thread, "I saw your son put something in your drink." For a moment, I thought I misheard, or misunderstood, or that he meant something innocuous, a garnish, a refill, a joke, but he didn't blink. I looked down at the glass of orange juice next to my plate, untouched, still sweating lightly on the outside. I remembered Garrett nudging it closer earlier, saying, "Vitamin C, Mom. You always forget to hydrate." I didn't say a word, just nodded to the waiter. Then I picked up my purse, left the glass where it was, and stood. From the corner of my eye, I saw Camille laugh again. Garrett spun her under the chandelier. Neither noticed me walking out. 15 minutes later, I was in the back of a cab heading north. My phone buzzed once. Garrett's name on the screen. I turned it face down on the seat beside me. Some silences. Save lives. If this moment pulled something in your chest, you may want to stay with me. Not every betrayal shouts. Some simply shift a glass 2 inches to the left. Back at my condo, I locked the door behind me and pulled the curtains shut. I didn't cry. I didn't even sit down. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer beside the refrigerator, and took out the slim metal case that had sat there untouched for months. Inside, nestled between foam padding, were 2 sterile glass vials and a pair of latex gloves. I'd bought them after the second time I got dizzy drinking coffee Garrett made me last fall. That time, I told myself it was stress, the flu, my age, but something inside me, something Julian used to call your whisper of warning, had stayed restless since. I unscrewed the cap of one vial and slipped on the gloves. The cab driver had waited outside while I asked the doorman for a plastic cup, claiming I had forgotten my medicine at dinner. I poured the orange juice from the cup into the vial until it was half full, sealed it, and labeled it with today's date using a black marker I kept for recipe cards. I placed the second vial beside it, empty, just in case. Then I put the case in the back of the freezer behind the bags of frozen spinach and peas, until morning. Standing at the kitchen island, I noticed the reflection of the hallway light on the glass surface of the fridge, a soft gleam that reminded me of the night Julian handed me that old wristwatch on our 25th anniversary. He'd said, "Time tells the truth, Sylvia. You just have to wait long enough to hear it." The next morning, I'd make an appointment, lab testing, a legal consult, maybe change the locks. But that night, I simply stood there and whispered back to the silence. I heard it, Julian. I heard the truth. Outside the restaurant, the wind had picked up just enough to lift the hem of my coat. The Rowan's warm lights shimmered behind me, but I didn't turn back. I stood under the nearest street lamp, my hands still calm, though my breath came short. The weight of the orange juice in the to-go cup felt heavier than it should have. Not just juice, not anymore. I walked 2 blocks to the corner where cabs usually lingered after dinner time. One waited there, engine humming. I opened the door, gave my address, and settled into the back seat without glancing at my phone. The cab smelled faintly of pine air freshener. I let the cold plastic of the cup rest in my lap. With each turn of the wheels beneath us, a thought repeated. That was your son, your own son. But doubt crept in, as it always does. Maybe Ellis was mistaken. Maybe the glass had been switched. Maybe it was something else entirely. Still, I hadn't drunk it, and I wouldn't. By the time the elevator reached the 30th floor of my building, I already knew what I would do next. I walked to the kitchen and opened the bottom drawer under the spice rack. A small, padded pouch lay tucked beneath the emergency flashlight. I pulled it out and unzipped it carefully. Inside were 2 glass vials, a small plastic funnel, and 3 pairs of gloves. I'd bought the kit 6 months earlier, not because I expected to use it, but because of the kind of woman I've always been, prepared. Julian used to laugh at my drawer full of what-ifs. "You've got a plan for every thunderstorm, Sil," he'd say, tapping the side of his temple. "One day you'll save us all with a teaspoon and rubber band." I slipped on the gloves, unscrewed the cap of the first vial, and placed the funnel inside. With slow, measured hands, I poured half the orange juice from the restaurant cup into the glass container. The color settled into the bottom like molten amber. Then I reached for a second cup and walked out onto the small balcony that faced east toward the harbor. The tree-lined street below shimmered faintly under streetlights. I looked for a patch of soil among the trimmed hedges and poured the remaining juice at the base of a maple tree that had turned early this year. Its red leaves had always reminded me of Julian's tie the night he gave me the watch. "You wore red because you were nervous," I once told him. He had grinned and said, "I wore red so you'd notice me across the room." Back inside, I capped the vial and labeled it with the date and time. Then I placed it into the insulated pouch and stored it in the refrigerator's lower drawer. Behind a carton of eggs I rarely used, the other vial remained untouched, just in case. I stood for a long moment staring at the small pool of juice that had dried in a faint ring on the counter. Something about it, the way the light caught its edge, reminded me of candlelight dancing off silverware at our wedding dinner 42 years ago. Julian had leaned across the table then, brushed his thumb over my hand, and said, "You'll always see what I can't. That's your gift, Sylvia." And he was right. I saw it tonight. Or maybe I finally chose to believe what I'd suspected for too long. I walked to the study, picked up the landline, and pressed 0 for the front desk. "Concierge," came the familiar voice. "This is Sylvia Hawthorne in 3007, I said calmly. "Effective immediately. Remove Garrett and Camille Hawthorne from my guest access list. No one is to enter this floor without my written permission. Do you understand?" There was a pause. "Yes, ma'am, understood. And please log this call in writing." I hung up before they could ask questions. For a long time after, I stood at the window, watching the city shift and move. Taillights glowed in the distance. Somewhere below, someone was laughing. Someone else was running to catch a bus. But up here, it was still and silent. My phone vibrated on the counter. Garrett's name again. No voicemail, just a missed call. Then a message. "Mom, everything okay? You left so fast?" Camille said, "Maybe you felt sick. Want us to bring anything by?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I turned off the phone, set it beside the refrigerator, and made myself a pot of tea. The warmth of the mug seeped into my palms. I wrapped my fingers around it tightly, anchoring myself. Not everything would make sense tonight, but one thing did. Trust, once chipped, doesn't break in half all at once. It cracks slowly, quietly, like ice shifting under your feet, and eventually, it gives way. The next morning, I was at the lab before they unlocked the doors. It was a modest private clinic tucked between a flower shop and a Pilates studio in the quieter side of town. I didn't want noise. I wanted clarity, the kind that came with white coats and chain of custody forms. The receptionist blinked when I stepped in. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I do have something that needs testing." I opened my bag, took out the insulated pouch, and placed it gently on the counter. The glass vial was still cold from the refrigerator. Labeled. Sealed. "I'd like a full toxicology screening, blood level standards, with documentation." A technician named Nate appeared behind the frosted glass window, alert and clean-shaven, no older than 30. He approached the counter, glanced at the pouch, then at me. "Chain of custody requested?" "Yes." He nodded once. No questions, no judgment, just protocol. He handed me a clipboard. As I filled in my name, I saw the reflection of my own handwriting in the window. Still neat, still steady. The name at the top, Sylvia Hawthorne. 10 minutes later, Nate handed me a receipt and a timeline. "You'll receive a preliminary report in 24 hours. Full documentation and formal results by end of week. Do you notify authorities?" "Only if required or requested." I gave him a nod that meant, not yet. Outside, the city hadn't fully woken up. Traffic was light. Birds moved through power lines like notes on a wire. I pulled out my phone and typed a number I hadn't called in over a year. Mara Ellison. She answered on the second ring. "Sylvia?" "It's time," I said. 10 years ago, Mara helped me and Julian draft our estate plans. He respected her sharp mind and unshakable discretion. I trusted her with my health proxy when I had pneumonia 3 winters ago. She was the kind of woman who wore wool in summer and spoke in carefully constructed sentences, always a few degrees cooler than everyone else in the room. We met at her office downtown, a corner unit above a quiet law library. The light through the glass was pale and exact. Mara had not changed. Same gray slacks, same tortoiseshell glasses, same glance that made you sit straighter without knowing why. She poured us each a cup of tea without asking. Earl Grey, no sugar, just like I remembered. I opened my folder, laid out the affidavit request from the lab, and explained what had happened the night before. She didn't interrupt, just nodded once, then again. "Have you changed your power of attorney recently?" she asked. "I don't think so." "Mind if I check?" I passed her the leather folder that held the bulk of my personal paperwork. She scanned through the documents, stopping at a single page with a silver clip at the top. Her eyes narrowed. "This one," she said, tapping it, "was signed last fall, during the week you were hospitalized with that fever." I leaned in. The header was familiar. The signature was mine. The date, too. But I didn't remember reading the fine print. "Who prepared it?" I asked, though I already knew. "Camille, filed as a precaution during your hospital stay. Signed by you, here, with shaky handwriting." I stared at the ink. My own name, slightly tilted, the loops uneven. I remembered being tired, sweating through hospital sheets. Camille had brought me soup, told me not to worry. "She said it was just temporary," I murmured. Technically, it granted Garrett full financial authority. Investments, trust changes, banking access. A flush rose behind my ears. I gave them the keys, with my own hand. Mara leaned back. "You didn't give them anything they didn't ask for, and we can take it back." I swallowed hard. "How?" "We start by revoking the existing document. Then we establish a new power of attorney, restricted, accountable, and clear. We lock everything down. Then we decide how to proceed. Quietly, legally, and entirely in your favor. For a long moment, I said nothing, just sat with the silence. Then I looked her in the eye. Let's begin. She pulled out a fresh folder and clicked her pen open. First step, control. Second step, evidence. Third step, accountability. Nothing loud, just paper. I nodded. Julian would have liked you. She gave the faintest smile. He always said, paper doesn't lie. People do. By noon, I'd signed 3 documents and authorized the withdrawal of Garrett and Camille's access to every shared account and legal platform they'd touched. Back in the elevator, alone again, I reached into my bag and touched the corner of the vial still waiting in the fridge. Cold glass, warmer truth. Justice didn't have to arrive in a storm. Sometimes it walked in on flat shoes, carrying a manila folder. By the time the afternoon light filtered across my dining table, the legal storm had already begun. Quietly, silently in the background like a system rerouting power. Mara moved fast. That's what I've always admired about her. Not aggressive, never reckless, just efficient like the tide. While most people start with anger, Mara starts with paperwork. Her assistant emailed me a preliminary draft of a new trust at 3:12 p.m. It was titled the Fernhill Foundation, named for the place Julian proposed, a quiet clearing in the Berkshires beneath a rust-red maple tree with no plaque, no name, no pretension, just shade. I read the title again and let the words settle. Fernhill, the beginning of something gentle. Mara called at 3:30. We're ready to move all major accounts. You'll be sole trustee. This will override any automatic PIODs or beneficiary clauses. It severs Garrett and Camille's names from every document going forward. I stood at the kitchen counter, one hand resting on the marble edge. Do it, I said. We began with the retirement portfolios, 3 accounts spread across 2 brokerages. Mara's team issued revocation letters, backed by the notarized documents I had signed that morning. Next came the real estate holdings, my condo, a lake cabin in Vermont, and the downtown office building I hadn't visited since Julian died. All were retitled under the Fernhill Foundation. Then came the accounts Garrett didn't know about, the ones I kept untouched for decades, the ones I opened in the early Lexora years when every dollar mattered and no one paid attention to long-term planning except women like me. It felt like folding back a corner of myself no one had seen in years. At 4:05 p.m., I stepped into Mosswood Bank. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need an appointment. My name still opened doors. Bianca Moss herself met me in the lobby. Her heels clicked once for every 5 of my silent steps. She wore a navy dress and a gold pin that matched her practiced smile. Sylvia, she said, taking my hand like we were old friends. Congratulations on the Lexora deal. You've always known how to exit with elegance. I returned her smile just enough to keep things cordial. I need a full transfer of assets. Today, I've signed new legal directives. She blinked. Once. Then again. All of them? Yes, every account associated with my name, every beneficiary, every linked party. If you see the names Garrett or Camille Hawthorne anywhere, remove them, effective immediately. She led me to a private office with glass walls and pale wood paneling. As she pulled up the records, her fingers hesitated above the keyboard. There were recent updates, she said, cautious. A few days ago, request for dual authorization on select accounts. Trusted party access. The IP address came from your home. I nodded slowly. That's been handled. Bianca cleared her throat and retrieved the file Mara had emailed directly to her office. Her brows lifted slightly at the signatures. The new power of attorney, the founding papers for Fernhill, the sealed revocation order. You've been thorough. I don't leave my doors half open. It took nearly an hour, but by the end of it, the foundation owned everything. I had no personal accounts left, just control of an entity no one else could touch. Bianca handed me a new set of digital credentials. These are one-time setup codes. The system will lock out any previous users within the hour. As I signed the final page, I looked up and met her eyes. Did they try to move? Anything this week? Bianca hesitated, then tapped a note on her screen. There was a query. Monday. Camille requested a meeting to discuss legacy disbursements. She mentioned concerns about your cognitive capacity? I offered coolly. She gave a polite, uncomfortable smile. I declined the appointment, said all decisions would need to come directly from you. She hasn't called back. I stood, tucked the folder into my purse, and thanked her. Before I reached the door, Bianca said quietly, "It's not often we see someone reclaim their narrative like this, especially not so completely." I paused with my hand on the doorframe. "I'm not reclaiming anything," I said. "I'm just reminding them whose name was on the deed from the beginning." Back home, I opened the balcony doors and let the late afternoon breeze sweep in. The city stretched out below like a story I no longer needed to explain. I poured myself a glass of water and sat beside the maple plant I'd been trying to keep alive since winter, a little browning at the tips, still growing. From here on out, everything would be under Fernhill, a name born not of control, but of letting go, a place where love once started, and now where old expectations ended. The messages began just after midnight. I was sitting in bed with my reading glasses on, holding a worn hardcover of Julian's favorite poetry collection. I hadn't touched it in years. The binding still smelled faintly of cedar. The pages opened to a bookmark he'd left behind, a thin receipt from a hardware store, dated 4 weeks before he passed. The screen lit up once, then again, then again. First was Camille. "Sylvia, we need to talk. I think you're overreacting. Let's not escalate things." Then Garrett. "Mom, I'm confused. Camille said you changed some access stuff. What's going on?" And then a third. "We're your family. Don't shut us out." I didn't respond. The tea beside me had gone cold. I set it aside and turned off the phone, letting the weight of their words sit in the dark. Not out of cruelty, not even revenge, just clarity. I slept with the curtains open that night. I wanted the morning light to arrive without warning, without pretense. At 6:15 a.m., I was already dressed. Beige turtleneck, slate pants, hair pulled back. I called building security and scheduled a full lock change. The locksmith arrived by 7:40 with a rolling kit and a quiet professionalism I appreciated. By 8:15, every door in the condo had new cylinders, new pins, and a new master key. He handed it to me in a small envelope. I thanked him. Then I handed him a printed list. "No access for any of these names. If they ask, tell them to contact legal." He didn't blink, just nodded and returned to his cart. By 9 CA, the security cameras were updated. 2 new units installed. One in the foyer, the other by the service elevator. Motion activated. Discreet. I changed the passwords to my email, financial platforms, and phone carrier. Updated my contact info with the brokerage, the insurance firm, and the board of the building. Everything now routed through my direct line. No shared permissions, no soft spots. I paused before submitting the last form, the one for digital health proxies. It was the same portal Julian and I had registered on years ago when we chose each other as emergency contacts. I hovered over Garrett's name, then I deleted it. No anger, no trembling, just finality. The sound of the door chime broke the silence. It was soft, polite. Not a knock, just the alert that someone had scanned an outdated key card. I stepped to the monitor by the entryway and saw Camille's face, slightly turned, jaw clenched. She pressed the card again. The light blinked red. She looked straight into the camera. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between impatience and disbelief. Then she turned and walked away, the click of her heels muffled by the carpeted hallway. I printed the access log and filed it with Mara's documents. Later that morning, Garrett called again. I let it ring. Then he tried from a different number. This time I answered, but said nothing. "Mom?" he asked. Silence. "Look, I don't know what's going on. Camille said you changed everything. She's upset. She thinks you're angry. I waited. Are you okay? He finally asked. Do you need anything? My voice was steady. Do you want to know if I'm okay, Garrett? Or if I know? There was silence on his end. He started, then stopped. You left the dinner early. I didn't understand. Did something happen? You know what happened, I said. You were holding the glass. He exhaled sharply, but didn't deny it. Camille said you'd misread. She said that to you, not to me. A long pause. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered, but you were willing to let it happen. He didn't argue. The line was still open when I said, I suggest you both stop trying the elevator. The building logs every access. So do I. I hung up. There were no more messages that day. I sat by the kitchen window just after noon, stirring a bowl of soup I didn't finish. The city outside moved as it always had, unaware, unconcerned, free. I thought about how often we mistake access for love, that giving someone a key doesn't mean they know how to enter gently. Garrett had held the door open once. As a boy, running ahead to press the elevator button for me, he used to grin every time it opened, like it was magic. Now, the only magic left was the lock that didn't click open for him anymore. I turned the camera feed off. Then I folded the old apartment key he once used into a linen napkin and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Not out of sentiment, just to remember what trust used to sound like. 3 days after the dinner, Ellis Tran sat across from me in the polished quiet of Mara Ellison's conference room. He looked younger in daylight, less composed than he had been at the Rowan, though his hands were still steady. He wore a plain button-down shirt, no tie, and kept his backpack by his feet like he didn't trust it out of reach. Mara had offered him tea, but he declined, just clasped his hands together and waited. I watched him closely, not with suspicion, with something else, something like awe. In a world where most people look away, this young man had stepped forward. Mara opened her folder. The affidavit was already prepared. Nate from the lab had emailed a preliminary toxicology breakdown earlier that morning. Ellis cleared his throat. I don't know how much this actually helps. I didn't see what it was, just what happened. Tell us what you saw, Mara said gently, in your words. Ellis nodded. It was during the second course. Your son, Mr. Garrett, he reached into his coat pocket while his wife was talking to the sommelier. He took out a small silver tube, not a bottle. More like one of those liquid vitamin droppers, but metal. I said nothing, just listened. He unscrewed the top and leaned over, pretending to check the table setting. I saw him tilt the glass, your glass, and empty the liquid into the juice. He did it fast. Wiped the rim with his napkin. Then he pushed the glass back toward your plate. He stopped, looked at me. That's when I waited until they were distracted and came to tell you. Mara didn't interrupt. She let silence do what silence does best, test the truth. Ellis glanced down. I've never seen anything like that before. I didn't want to assume, but I couldn't just stand there. You did more than most would, I said. He offered a small nod. My mother's a nurse. She always said, if something feels wrong in your stomach, don't wait for your brain to catch up. Mara turned the affidavit toward him. Please read this carefully. If everything is correct, sign at the bottom. This will remain private unless legal action is taken. He read it slowly, lips moving slightly as he followed the lines. When he reached the end, he looked up at me. Will he go to jail? That depends on more than just your statement, Mara said. But what you've given us is truth. That has weight, no matter where it lands. Ellis signed. The pen barely made a sound. Mara stamped and dated the document, then tucked it into her legal binder with the kind of care you'd reserve for glass. As Ellis stood to leave, I reached into my bag and handed him a sealed envelope. "There's something in there for your time," I said. He shook his head. "I didn't do it for money." "I know. That's why I trust you." He hesitated, then took the envelope, tucked it into his pocket, and gave a small bow, awkward, sincere, entirely his own. When he left, the room felt cooler. Mara opened her laptop. "You want the lab results now?" "Just the summary," I said. She read from the screen. "The substance added to your drink was a combination of 2 agents, a mild sedative and a common blood thinner. Separately, both legal. Together, they could be dangerous, especially in someone with a heart condition." I nodded. Julian had taken blood pressure medication for years, so had I after the pneumonia. Camille would know that, Garrett too, if he paid attention. Would it have harmed me? Mara didn't answer right away. Then she folded her hands. "It would have made you drowsy, confused. If you had an adverse reaction, yes, it could have been serious." "And if I'd driven home afterward?" She met my eyes. "You wouldn't have made it." I felt no tears, no shaking, just a cold clarity that wrapped itself around the spine. Then Ellis didn't just help. He saved my life. That, Mara said, is something no one can spin. I looked out the window. The city below moved with its usual rhythm. Cars blinked through intersections. People hurried with coffee and tote bags and earbuds. They had no idea a woman in a pale gray sweater had just discovered the line between her son and her death was thinner than a drop of liquid. Mara closed her laptop. Next step? I leaned back in the chair. The leather creaked beneath me. We moved quietly. No threats, no drama, just facts. "You want to press charges?" "Not yet. I want to give them a choice." Mara didn't ask what kind. She knew it wouldn't be forgiveness, not outright. But I believed in consequences that taught, not destroyed. Ellis had chosen to speak. I would choose how to respond. Justice didn't always need handcuffs. Sometimes it wore a name tag, offered you a whisper, and walked away with grace. At 10:11 a.m. the next morning, I received a call from Mosswood Bank's fraud monitoring team. The woman on the line, polite but tense, asked to verify a new access authorization that had just been triggered for one of my accounts. She read the account number, ending in 029, the same trust account I had just moved under the Fernhill Foundation less than 48 hours earlier. "We're confirming whether you approved a third-party login from a residential IP linked to your building," she said. "The user attempted to change security settings and link a new mobile device for dual authentication." I didn't speak right away. The agent waited. "Was the name associated with the request Camille Hawthorne?" I finally asked. There was a pause, then a quiet exhale. "Yes, ma'am. As a listed trusted party, previously." "Not anymore," I said. "Revoke all pending changes immediately. Lock the account." The woman hesitated. "Unfortunately, it's not that simple, because the original power of attorney was on file." "That document has been legally revoked," I cut in. "I've submitted a new POA and trust control order via attorney Mara Ellison. You should have received it directly from her office yesterday." "One moment, please." I could hear the soft click of a keyboard and murmured voices in the background. Then her voice returned, slightly changed, a little more urgent. "Yes, I see it now, time-stamped and sealed. I apologize. The system flagged the new documents but had not yet blocked access pending manual confirmation. That process is being finalized now." "How close were they?" She didn't answer at first. I asked again. There was a tiny click as she tapped her keyboard. "If you had called 1 hour later," she said carefully, "the new device would have been fully authorized, and funds could have been moved." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. "They knew," I said. "They waited until the systems hadn't fully caught up. We've now locked all requests and flagged the account. From this point on, only in-person changes with biometric ID and a legal rep will be processed." "Good," I said. "And Ms. Hawthorne?" "Yes?" We're notifying you because you're the legal trustee, but the attempt came with language requesting urgent access due to mental decline and executive confusion. I opened my eyes. There it was again. That slow, creeping strategy I had feared ever since Camille first started offering to handle small details on my behalf. They tried to build the narrative, I murmured. I'm sorry. Nothing. Thank you. Please send me a full incident report, PDF and hard copy, one for me, one for my attorney. Of course. I ended the call. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in the hallway, a vacuum hummed softly against the carpet. The world, as usual, carried on, unaware of what almost happened beneath its noise. I dialed Mara. They tried the bank, I said when she picked up. Under the old logic, I was confused, forgetful, declining. And they timed it during the paperwork lag, she said. They're more calculating than I thought. I'm no longer shocked, just confirming patterns. We have enough now, she said. Affidavit, lab report, attempted unauthorized access. It's all admissible. I want to offer them one chance. Under what terms? Meet me. In person. One option each. And they choose. You're ready for that? I looked out at the skyline beyond the glass. The clouds had begun to shift. Soft streaks of light were breaking through. Yes, I said, but we do it my way, at the Rowan. Mara paused. Same table? Exactly. And the documents? 2 envelopes, I said. 1 white, 1 red. I'll explain the rest at the table. There was silence on her end. Then she said, I'll have them drawn up tonight. Thank you. After we hung up, I walked to the filing cabinet in my study and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was Julian's last will. Untouched, but not unread. He had always trusted me to know when to move and when to wait. Next to it, I placed the bank's printed call log and the copy of the POA revocation. Paper told a story the tongue often couldn't. I closed the drawer gently and ran my fingers along its edge. They had almost made it. Almost opened a door into my life they no longer had a key to. But almost is not enough when you're playing with a mother who built her empire from nothing but nerve, notebooks, and nights without sleep. And this time, I had one more thing I hadn't had before. I had witnesses, and the law was watching, too. The Rowan felt colder the second time. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was the knowledge that this was where it all began, the soft music, the candlelight, the glass I never touched. Yet tonight, I returned not as a guest, not as a mother, but as a woman holding the final page of her own ledger. I arrived 10 minutes early. Table 14 had been reserved under my name. The same table, the same window view, but no drinks this time. Only a linen folder beside my silverware, and 2 envelopes placed deliberately in front of me, 1 white, 1 red. The white one was thinner, clean, final. The red one was heavier, conditional, strategic. At 6:58 p.m. they arrived. Garrett wore the same navy suit he'd worn to Julian's funeral. Camille, in structured ivory like she had something to prove. Neither offered a greeting. Neither made eye contact with the staff. They sat down without invitation. Camille adjusted the napkin in her lap with military precision. Garrett glanced at the envelopes, then at me. "What's this?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence breathe. Then I folded my hands in front of me. "This is your moment," I said. "Your one moment to choose who you want to be." Camille gave a short laugh. "Sylvia, whatever story you think you've built..." "You brought it with you," I said calmly. "The performance. Even now." "I came to understand," she snapped. "You've locked us out of everything. Accounts, property, even the front desk of your building. Garrett hasn't slept in days." "That's not true," Garrett muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. I turned to him. "You have a son's voice, but not yet a man's spine." He flinched. Camille leaned in. "If this is about the drink..." I had it tested. That stopped her. Her breath hitched for just a second. The results are in a safe place, I continued, along with the affidavit, the building logs, the footage of you trying to enter with a deactivated card. Her jaw clenched, but her eyes flicked to Garrett. He looked down. I reached for the envelopes. The white envelope, I said, sliding it forward, contains everything you've earned. Police involvement, revoked access, a legal record that follows you both. And the other? Garrett asked, his voice small. I slid the red envelope toward him. It contains a second option. You both walk away. No inheritance, no access to the foundation, no more tricks, but no jail. In exchange, you each agree to 12 months of court-verified therapy, paid for, pre-selected, and you sign permanent waivers of claim. Camille scoffed. Therapy? You're not serious. I met her eyes. Deadly. You can't blackmail us. It's not blackmail, it's accountability. Garrett reached for the red envelope. Camille grabbed his wrist. Don't. We should fight this. He turned to her. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something old in his eyes, something younger, more uncertain. She's giving us a way out. Camille leaned back, arms crossed. You're falling for this. I'm tired, he said. Tired of lying. Tired of hiding. You never had the stomach for risk, she muttered. He looked at me. Can we read it first? I nodded. They opened the red envelope together. Inside were 2 documents. The first, a formal agreement to forfeit all inheritance rights and access to my accounts. The second, a therapy commitment, signed already by Mara's office and sealed with the Fernhill Foundation's emblem. Camille didn't touch the papers. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. This, she said, placing it on the table, is Dr. Howard Mandel, licensed psychologist. We met with him last week. He's prepared to write an evaluation suggesting that you may be in early cognitive decline. Executive dysfunction. It explains your paranoia. I didn't blink. I just reached into my folder and laid down a sealed envelope with my most recent medical evaluation from 2 independent doctors. Then I smiled just faintly. I knew you might try this. Garrett looked between us. Wait, Camille, you said we were just meeting to talk. She didn't respond. From behind me, footsteps approached. A tall man in a charcoal blazer stepped forward, quietly, professionally. Ms. Hawthorne? Mara had sent someone from her office. He turned to Camille. If you intend to proceed with a guardianship claim, be advised that Ms. Hawthorne's legal team has already filed a protective petition with the court. Your doctor's evaluation would be weighed against certified video evidence and verified test results, including the attempted unauthorized bank access. Camille's face drained of color. This is absurd, she whispered. I was only trying to protect her. No, I said, voice soft. You were trying to replace me, piece by piece. Garrett stared at the red envelope. If we sign this, it's over? I nodded. For me, yes. For you, that depends on how you walk the next year. He swallowed hard. Then he reached for the pen Mara's assistant offered. Camille didn't move. I won't beg, she said. I'm not asking you to. I won't apologize. I'm not waiting for it. She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, quietly, she reached for the pen. The papers had been signed. One by one, Garrett and Camille placed their pens down on the linen tablecloth, just inches away from the remains of 2 untouched glasses of water. The air at table 14 hung heavier than it ever had, more than birthdays, anniversaries, or the night I launched Lexora with Julian over a shared creme brulee. Mara's assistant collected the signed agreements, slid them carefully into a folder, and nodded to me. Then, just as planned, he turned and walked toward the entrance, where Ellis was waiting. Ellis had arrived 10 minutes earlier and waited discreetly by the fountain near the bar, dressed in black again, though not in uniform. I had asked him for one final act, not of loyalty, but of truth. He stepped forward slowly, quietly, almost shyly. Camille's face twisted with confusion. Garrett turned pale. Ellis stopped at the edge of the table. His voice, when it came, was calm and clear. "I was the waiter that night," he said, "the one who saw what happened." Camille stiffened in her seat. Ellis continued, his eyes steady. "I saw you, Mr. Hawthorne. Take something from your pocket, a small metal tube. I saw you pour it into Mrs. Hawthorne's drink while your wife distracted the staff. I watched you wipe the rim with a napkin, push the glass forward, and then I came to her table." Garrett lowered his head. Camille tried to laugh. It didn't land. "You have no idea what you're saying." "I signed a sworn affidavit," Ellis said. "I have nothing to gain from this, but I couldn't watch something wrong happen and stay quiet." I didn't say a word. I reached into my purse and pulled out the final folder. Inside were 3 printed items. The affidavit signed by Ellis, the preliminary toxicology report from the lab, a still image from the building security camera, Camille trying to enter my floor with a deactivated key card. I laid them out side by side. Camille stared at the papers. Garrett's hands shook. "I didn't know she had all this," he whispered. Camille's voice turned cold. "So you're going to let her make us look like criminals?" I leaned forward just slightly. "No one here is calling anyone a criminal. These are simply facts, dates, images, lab findings, witness statements. If you feel misrepresented, you're welcome to respond in court." Garrett shook his head. No court, please." Camille narrowed her eyes. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare press charges, not your own son." I folded my hands gently. "Camille, you misunderstand me. I am not here to punish you. I am here to protect myself." She laughed once, brittle. "This is insanity." And then I reached for the watch on my wrist, Julian's old silver timepiece. I tapped its surface twice, slowly. Across the restaurant, Mara's assistant raised his phone. "I wanted you both to know," I said softly, "that since the moment you walked in here tonight, every word has been recorded, with consent, in a public venue, for legal protection." Camille's mouth parted. "You're paranoid." "No," I said. "I'm careful. There's a difference." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Ellis stepped back, unsure. "Sit down," Garrett whispered. "Please, just stop." But Camille didn't stop. She grabbed the signed red envelope and crumpled it in her hand, eyes locked on me. "What are you going to do now? Show this to a judge? Parade us through a courtroom?" I held her gaze. "No, I'm going to let the envelope speak for itself." She glanced at Ellis, then at Garrett. Then, with the eyes of the restaurant just beginning to turn toward us, she made a mistake. She tore the crumpled document in two. The moment her hands moved, I reached for my purse again. But I didn't pull out paper this time. I pulled out my phone and quietly tapped a preset notification. A message silently delivered itself to Mara's team. Camille's voice cracked. "There. Is that what you wanted?" And I said nothing, just waited. Seconds later, a man in a slate gray blazer approached from the host's stand. Calm, neutral. He stopped beside Camille and said, "Ma'am, I need you to know that destruction of a legal document in a pending agreement can be documented as willful obstruction." Camille looked at Garrett. "Are you going to let them do this?" He didn't answer. The blazered man continued, "We will not press charges tonight, but your action has been logged. Copies exist. Every document you tore is digitized, time-stamped, and acknowledged. Any further misconduct will be noted by the court." Camille's face drained of all color. I stood then, adjusted my coat, picked up the watch from the table and fastened it around my wrist. "This was never about money," I said. "It was about memory and the line between dignity and silence." I looked at Garrett. "You still have the choice to walk this differently." He nodded slowly. "I know." I turned to Ellis and whispered, "Thank you," again. And we walked out, past the quiet waiters, past the unasked questions, past the two people I had once called family. Not once did I look back. Some goodbyes don't need doors to close. Just the weight of truth laid gently on the table. The next morning arrived with no messages, no missed calls, no door chimes, just silence. The kind that used to make me uneasy, but now felt earned. At precisely 9 a.m., the elevator light blinked outside the conference floor of Mara's office. I watched through the security feed as Garrett and Camille stepped out, side by side. No sunglasses, no lawyer, no noise. Just them. They didn't bring the torn document, but they didn't have to. Mara opened the door herself. No assistant this time. She led them into the same room where I'd signed the trust transfer, the revocation papers, the foundation charter, every page that had brought us to this moment. A fresh copy of Option B was already waiting, 2 copies signed by Mara and sealed with the notary's stamp. Garrett sat first. Camille remained standing. "Do you still have the footage?" she asked. I nodded. "Multiple copies, multiple formats, in multiple places." "Of course," she said softly. Then she looked at Mara. "I've reviewed the agreement. I'll sign it, but I won't apologize." I raised my hand slightly. "I'm not asking for one." She blinked, as if thrown off balance. Then, without further comment, she signed. The ink dried before her tone did. Garrett took the pen next. He didn't touch the paper right away, just stared at the page, then at me. "I read your letter," he said quietly. I didn't speak. I waited. He looked down. It was the first thing I've read in a long time that didn't yell at me. It just held me accountable. Camille scoffed. Garrett didn't flinch. He signed the document, neatly, one stroke at a time. Mara collected the papers, checked the signatures, and closed the file. "As of this moment," she said, "you are both removed from all financial associations with Mrs. Hawthorne, including but not limited to trust inheritance, property ownership, medical proxies, and banking access." Camille's voice was tight. "We understand. You will be required to enroll in a 12-month therapy program, reviewed quarterly by an independent panel." Mara continued, "If either of you fails to comply, the protection clause is void and legal recourse will resume." Garrett nodded. Camille did not. I reached into my bag and took out a small sealed envelope. No markings on the front, just their names written inside. "This is the last item I'll hand you," I said. "Inside is a list of approved therapists, 3 options each, your choice, not mine, but they're vetted, neutral, and non-negotiable." Camille took her copy. Garrett took his. "And one more thing," I said, turning to my son. "You'll find another envelope inside yours. It's from me, handwritten. That one you read on your own time. Not now, not together." He nodded slowly. "I will." No one stood right away. Camille looked like she wanted to storm out, but she didn't. Instead, she folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her purse, expression unreadable. Garrett held the envelope differently, tenderly, almost, as if it might breathe. They left without shaking hands, without saying goodbye. The elevator doors closed with a soft thud that echoed longer than it should have. After they were gone, Mara sat down across from me. "You sure about this path?" she asked. "I'm sure about my peace," I said, "and that's enough." She slid her glasses off and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "You gave them a road, Sylvia. Most people would have built a wall." I smiled faintly. "Walls fall. Roads change people." That afternoon, I made myself tea and opened the window in my study. The breeze was softer now. The tree across the courtyard had started to bud, early, unexpected. Green tips reached toward the sky like it had somewhere to be. I didn't wait long to hear back. That evening, I received a delivery slip. Garrett had returned home alone. He unlocked his apartment quietly. No argument, no slammed door. And later that night, Long after the city had dimmed to a hush, a motion light blinked on near my mailbox. A small envelope had been slid beneath the door. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, my handwriting. He had opened the letter. On it I had written, "Forgiveness isn't something I give. It's a road you choose. If you choose to walk it fully. If not, stay off my path." The next morning, I watched the camera feed. Garrett stood on the sidewalk outside my building. He didn't press the buzzer. He didn't call. He just stood there for a while, reading the letter again. Then he walked away. Not toward Camille's building, but somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere maybe he'd start again. It was just past midnight when the knock came. Not a doorbell. Not a buzz through the security panel. A knock. 3 soft taps. Barely louder than the wind pressing against the windows of my 30-story apartment. I was still awake. Sleep had become an elusive guest in recent weeks, replaced by long evenings of warm tea and open books I never quite finished. Tonight, I had been reading Julian's old notebook, his sketches of house plans, business ideas, scattered with his neat, all-caps handwriting. One line underlined twice. "Control isn't loud, it's knowing when to be still." The knock came again. I didn't stand right away. I simply reached for the small screen beside my reading chair and tapped to open the hallway camera. Garrett. He wasn't alone, but he wasn't with Camille either. He was with silence. His face looked worn, more than just tired, like someone who had crossed a distance that didn't show up on maps, no umbrella even though the rain had started to fall. His coat was damp. His eyes, softer than I remembered. I pressed the intercom but didn't speak. He looked directly into the lens. "I didn't come to ask anything," he said, his voice cracking just slightly. I needed to say something, even if it's just through a door." I said nothing. I didn't need to. He took a breath. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. Not really. Not at first. I thought I was just helping, protecting what was mine, what was supposed to be mine." He laughed once, short and bitter. "But I kept shrinking. Every day, every lie, every time I looked away. Camille would say, 'It's just paperwork. It's just temporary. It's just a safety net.' And I believed her, not because I trusted her, but because it was easier than facing what I'd become." He leaned, his forehead lightly against the door. "I thought maybe, if you were confused, I could fix it, redirect things, steer it without confronting it." I closed Julian's notebook. My hand rested on its spine. Garrett's voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "But you weren't confused. You were seeing clearly. You always did. And I was the one standing in shadow, telling myself it was light." He stepped back from the door, looking at the floor. "I'm not asking you to let me in. Not tonight. Not next week. I don't deserve it." Then he lifted his eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen since he was 8 years old, after he'd broken the neighbor's window and came to confess with a trembling lip and a paper flower. "I just needed you to know. I heard you. I read every word. And I'm walking the road, not because I want your approval, but because I can't live like this anymore." He placed a small object on the floor near the threshold, a copy of his signed therapy intake form, folded neatly in a clear sleeve. No note, no embellishment, just proof of choice. Then he stepped back. "I love you, Mom," he said, "even if I forgot how." And with that, he turned. No expectation, no parting glance. I watched him disappear down the hallway. Stillness filled the space where he had stood. I didn't open the door, but I stayed there for a long time, listening, not for footsteps, but for what silence feels like, when it no longer carries fear. At exactly 8:42 the next morning, Mara called. She didn't start with pleasantries, not her style, not anymore. "She filed it," Mara said. "Emergency guardianship petition. Camille submitted it just after 7 a.m. I didn't react, not outwardly. The words arrived like dull bells, familiar, expected, but still heavy. On what grounds? I asked. Cognitive instability, emotional paranoia, and risk to self due to recent financial decisions. She's using my own protection as evidence against me. Mara exhaled on the line. We knew she might. She referenced your revocation of access as erratic behavior, cited the Fernhill Foundation as impulsive restructuring, and included a note from Dr. Mandel. I almost smiled. The same man she brought to the Rowan? The very one. I walked to the window as she spoke, looking down at the street below. Rain still clung to the curb, shimmering in the morning light. It was the kind of day that made you want to begin again. What do we need to do? I asked. I've already submitted a counter-response to the court. Attached were the following: your most recent medical evaluations, a certified letter from your primary care physician, Ellis's affidavit, and the lab results. I also included video from your building and footage from the Rowan. Everything time-stamped, sealed, clean. And the foundation documents? Already in their hands. You're listed as sole trustee. No indication of decline. No third-party co-signers. No beneficiaries pending approval. You have a stronger file than most CEOs. A pause. But Sylvia, Mara added, voice softening, she's pushing this fast. The hearing request was marked urgent. She wants me declared incompetent before Garrett completes his therapy intake, I said. She thinks if she can control the narrative fast enough, she can still win something. Exactly. I leaned against the window frame. And the judge? Honorable Louise Carrington. Fair, older, detail-oriented. I've appeared before her. She doesn't like being manipulated. Good. Mara continued. I requested an emergency hearing today. Noon. I'll represent you. You don't need to attend unless you want to. I thought for a moment. No. Let the paperwork speak. That's what Camille understands best. Understood. I ended the call and walked into the kitchen. My tea had gone cold again. I poured it down the sink, rinsed the cup, and filled it with clean water. I thought of the red envelope, signed, sealed, then torn, and of Camille's eyes when she realized I had come prepared for every move. At 12:43 p.m., Mara texted one line. Petition denied. Judge called her claim insufficient and speculative. Full transcript to follow. I stared at the message for a long moment, not with triumph, not with gloating, with breath. That was all it was. A full breath, deeper than usual, long overdue. I forwarded the message to no one. I said nothing aloud. Instead, I walked to the filing cabinet, opened the drawer marked personal, and placed the printed petition beside the court-stamped denial, not to save as a trophy, just to remember how close someone had come to stealing my name from my own story. That afternoon, I walked to the garden terrace on the 10th floor. No makeup, no coat, just a scarf and silence. Camille hadn't replied. Not to the court, not to Mara, not to me. I didn't expect her to. Control doesn't always end in noise. Sometimes it dies in a sealed envelope and the quiet knowledge that a door has finally closed. I sat on a bench near the far end of the terrace. A woman was reading a novel nearby. Another was watering a pot of geraniums. Life, as it always does, continued without waiting for anyone to catch up. I looked up at the sky. For the first time in weeks, it looked like it might clear. The next morning, I left my phone on the kitchen counter and walked down to the garden on the south end of the city. It wasn't manicured like the rooftop terrace. It didn't have curated hedges or timed sprinklers or benches engraved with donors' names. This garden had no plaques, no legacy on display, just quiet earth and things that chose to grow. It had been Julian's favorite place. He used to bring me here in the early days, before Luxora, before boardrooms and legal filings, back when success still felt like a maybe, and we were just two people, trying to outrun rent and raise something better than what we came from. There was a maple tree at the back of the garden, slightly crooked, leaning toward the sunlight. No fence around it, no bench beneath it, just open space. I sat cross-legged on the grass beneath its shade. Julian once told me, "Don't write your name on the gift. Let others enjoy the shade. That's how you live forever." It made more sense now than it did when we were young. I had spent so many years making sure everything had a label: property, shares, titles, signatures. I thought naming things meant protecting them, but sometimes naming just gives people a target. Sometimes the greatest protection is invisibility. A wind moved through the garden, lifting the edge of my scarf. I closed my eyes. I thought of Garrett, not the man at the restaurant, not the voice on the phone, but the boy with 2 missing teeth who once ran through sprinklers in his school clothes and begged me not to be mad. I thought of how I used to towel his hair dry with both hands, how he'd sit still only long enough to look up and say, "Mom, don't let the world make you tired." I had become tired, not of the world, of forgetting what mattered. It wasn't just that he betrayed me. It was that I let him drift so far into Camille's world without noticing. I let his voice become smaller, and when he reached for shortcuts, I mistook it for confidence. Under the tree, I pressed my palm to the dirt. The earth was cool, steady. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. The ache had softened into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a kind of release. People spend their lives chasing permanence, buildings, wills, foundations. They chase things that can't be taken. But permanence is a myth. Everything is taken. Everything fades. The only thing that stays is what you leave in others. Julian left me this tree, not in deed or in title, but in the memory of a lesson too quiet to forget. He'd once said, "Our lives aren't stories we finish. They're seeds. Plant wisely." I stood after a while, brushing the grass from my slacks. At the edge of the garden, a woman was sitting with her daughter, showing her how to thread flower stems together. The girl's laughter floated across the lawn like a bird that had never known a cage. I walked past them, nodding slightly. The mother smiled back. No recognition, no questions, just 2 strangers passing through the same air. And that, too, was enough. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, the city greeted me without notice. Cars honking, shoes tapping, a dog pulling its owner too fast. I felt the letter Garrett had returned, still folded in my pocket. I hadn't reread it. Didn't need to. Some words only need to be said once. Before heading home, I bought a small maple sapling from a florist on the corner. The woman wrapped it carefully, roots tucked in burlap, leaves still trembling from the morning dew. When I reached my building, the doorman held the door and said, "That for the rooftop?" I shook my head. "No, it's for somewhere without a plaque." That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a blank envelope and an open laptop. The table was clean, emptied of legal documents, untouched tea, and folded court letters. Just the maple sapling resting near the window, its tiny leaves catching the last gold light of the day. I opened a new document and titled it simply, Fernhill Foundation, Grant, Saolawa 1. It wasn't just a name anymore. It was real. Earlier that afternoon, Mara had filed the final tax classification. The foundation had been granted nonprofit status, retroactive to the first transfer of funds. Within hours, the inbox linked to our new domain received its first letter. I clicked to open it. "We confirm receipt of your grant proposal for public Wi-Fi expansion and digital literacy for midlife women returning to the workforce. We are pleased to offer preliminary approval and request implementation details." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I exhaled, slowly, steadily. The memory of Camille's voice, sharp and dismissive. "What will you even do with all that money, Sylvia? Donate laptops to strangers?" "Yes, that's exactly what I'll do." I began typing. The Fernhill Foundation's first program would provide refurbished laptops, software training, and internet access to women over 45 seeking re-entry into the workforce after divorce, caregiving, or career disruption. We would partner with 2 local shelters, 3 libraries, and 1 community college. No publicity, no headlines, just quiet restoration. I typed until my fingers ached, pausing only to sip warm ginger tea. Outside, the lights of the city twinkled like scattered intentions, some lost, some returned. I printed the final proposal and slid it into the envelope. On the front, I wrote nothing but the number 001. Then I reached into the lower drawer of the desk and pulled out the letter Julian had written me on our 25th wedding anniversary. He had left it inside his watch box, tucked behind a photo of Garrett as a toddler. I hadn't opened it until now. The paper had yellowed at the edges. His handwriting was steady, as always. Syl, if you're reading this, it means we made it further than we ever thought we could. And if I know you, you're still giving more than you're keeping. That's who you are. But one day, someone's going to forget how much it cost you to build what you built. And when they do, don't yell. Don't break. Don't become them. Just stand still and let the truth work. You don't owe anyone the softness they refuse to give, but you do owe yourself the peace you spent decades earning. So plant what matters. And if it grows, let it grow without your name on it. That's the best kind of legacy. J. I folded the letter back into its envelope and pressed it to my chest, not to weep, just to feel the weight of someone who still walked with me, even if time had taken his footsteps. I looked down at the laptop again. The Fernhill logo, a quiet green emblem of a single leaf, hovered on the screen. No slogans, no mission statements, just the next email waiting to be sent. I clicked reply. Yes, we accept. First delivery will be processed this Friday. I didn't sign it Sylvia Hawthorne, founder. I didn't need to. Just, we plant shade, not statues. The email sent with a soft chime. That night, I left the window open. The sapling near the sill rustled once as a breeze moved through, brushing against its young leaves like a whisper. And in the glow of the laptop screen, I smiled, not because everything was perfect, but because it was finally mine again. At exactly 9 a.m., the elevator light blinked and the doors opened without a sound. They were on time. No sunglasses, no handbags with legal folders, just two people, smaller than I remembered, not in height, but in presence. Camille wore a navy blouse, her hair tied back without a single strand loose. Garrett stood beside her, shoulders set, eyes lowered. Mara greeted them at the threshold. She led them down the hall, past framed prints of landscapes, and into the quiet conference room. I was already there, seated beneath the soft hum of the overhead lights, a carafe of water between us. No one spoke at first. Garrett broke the silence. I read your letter, he said softly. I nodded once. Camille sat straight-backed, hands clasped in front of her. I've agreed to the terms, she said. I'm starting therapy next Monday. I've selected the second name from your list. I'm not here for apologies, I said gently. Good, Camille replied without malice, because I'm not ready to give one, but I am ready to do what the paper says. You'll get compliance, not gratitude. Her honesty surprised me, but not in a way that offended. Then we're clear, I said. That's enough. Garrett reached into the inside pocket of his coat and placed a sealed envelope on the table. This is the intake confirmation. First appointment was this morning. I looked at it but didn't touch it. And how was it? I asked. His voice cracked slightly. Harder than I thought. Easier than I deserved. Camille blinked but said nothing. I turned to Mara. Let the documents show that both parties have complied. Full release to be processed by the end of the quarter. Access logs remain sealed. No further statements will be made. Mara nodded, recording the note in her ledger. Then, quietly, Garrett said, I used to think legacy was something someone gave you. He looked at me. I know now it's something you have to carry yourself. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small notebook. The cover was worn leather, the pages blank inside. I started this after your father passed, I said, but I never filled it. I slid it across the table. It's yours. Not as a gift, not as forgiveness, but as a start. Garrett stared at it, then slowly placed his hand over the cover. He didn't open it, just nodded. Camille stood first. She didn't offer a handshake, no hostility, just formality. "I'll see you in 12 months, she said. "Perhaps," I replied. She walked out of the room without looking back. Garrett lingered. "I've asked Camille to move out," he said. I raised an eyebrow, not in judgment, just acknowledgement. "I need space," he added. "Not just from her, from who I was." I didn't soften, I didn't offer comfort, but I did say, "That's the first honest sentence you've said to me in 2 years. His eyes brimmed, but he didn't cry. He placed the letter I'd written him gently back on the table. "I'm not done reading it," he whispered. "Some words you have to come back to when you're stronger." And then, almost too quiet to catch, "I don't know if you still love me, but I want to be the kind of son you wouldn't be ashamed to claim." I stood, walked to the window, and let the silence between us speak. Then I said, without turning around, "I don't sell love. I don't trade it either, but I do protect it." I heard the door click shut behind him. Later that afternoon, the building staff buzzed up a delivery. No note, no card, just a small brown box. Inside was Julian's watch, polished, repaired, reset to the correct time. The apartment was quiet, not the fragile kind of quiet that comes after an argument or the tense kind that follows a loss, but the kind that finally breathes, the kind that holds stillness like a friend. Sunlight streamed through the window just past 7 a.m., brushing softly against the rim of a glass of water I'd placed at the center of the kitchen table. It caught the light in a way I'd never seen before. Clean, honest. For the first time in weeks, I didn't see danger in a glass, only reflection. I sat alone, barefoot on the cool tile floor, sipping tea and watching the seconds pass on Julian's old wristwatch, the one Garrett had returned. He hadn't left a note. He didn't need to. The watch now rested beside the sapling near the window. Its maple leaves had unfurled overnight, small and deliberate. They reached for the sky as if they had no memory of being folded. I walked into my study and opened my laptop. There was one email I had left unsent, drafted weeks ago after the foundation documents were finalized. It was addressed to the team at the nonprofit coalition that helped advise Fernhill's early steps. The subject line was just 4 words: "We plant shade, not statues." The body was short. First grants issued, first devices delivered, first women logged on. Thank you. I hovered over the send button for only a moment, then pressed it. A soft chime confirmed what I already knew. It was done. Not over. Just done. There's a difference. I stood and moved toward the living room, where the light hit the wall in golden bands. I paused by the photo of Julian tucked discreetly beside a ceramic bowl of paper clips and old keys. I hadn't framed it formally. He never liked grand displays. I whispered to it, though I didn't expect a reply. You were right. The truth did the work. I walked back to the table and picked up the glass of water, still cool from the fridge. I raised it, not to toast, not to remember, but simply to acknowledge the moment. Then I drank, all of it, slowly, and nothing inside me flinched. At noon, I took the sapling downstairs, cradled gently in its burlap base. I didn't go to the rooftop garden or the curated plots in the plaza. I took it to the corner of the old street near the broken fence line no one ever bothered to fix. There, in a patch of soft dirt, I planted it. No plaque, no name, just roots and quiet. As I stood up, brushing earth from my palms, a young woman passed by, holding a child in one arm and a grocery bag in the other. She paused for a second, noticing the sapling, her eyes curious but kind. "New tree?" she asked. "Old hope," I replied. She smiled and kept walking. No fanfare, no questions, just life continuing. I returned upstairs and placed Julian's watch back in the drawer, Then I poured another glass of water and opened the curtains wide. Outside, the city pulsed, not with noise, but with motion. Trains humming, coffee cups clinking, children laughing in snippets, doors opening and closing, a new day starting, not because it had to, but because it could. I stood in the doorway for a while. Then I whispered the last line, just for myself. We plant shade, not statues. And I let the light in.